Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Big Picture. We are today in Bangalore, the capital of Karnataka, once or rather always known for its progressive nature, a state where a lot of things have happened progressively, economically and politically. But in the last decade, the image of the state seems to have taken a beating. On many fronts, we find that the state has not been what it used to be. It is a recent newspaper or a magazine report said that it is one of the most corrupt states in the country. So today we will look at all this while asking the question, what ails Karnataka? To discuss this, I have with me Professor Narendra Pani, a well-known economist at the National Institute of Advanced Study, Bangalore, Prakash Belwadi, a well-known columnist, a very well-known theatre activist and also a film director, and somebody who is a very hardcore Kannadiga. Chandan Gowda, a sociologist and a professor at the Azim Premji University. Imran Qureshi, a veteran journalist who has been covering politics and all other issues in Karnataka for the last more than 3 decades. So welcome to all of you. Professor Pani, Karnataka was known as the most progressive state. What has happened in the last 10 years or last decade or so that we are now talking only of the things which are going wrong or which have gone bad? Why has it happened so?
Basically, I think Karnataka has had the benefit of a number of great visionaries in the past.
Right.
And the gains that we've got from that are now sort of becoming overused, and we are reaching the end of what benefit we can get. The heavy investment in education going right back to the time of Krishraj Vaidya, early 20th century, formed a basis on which you could go make use of their potential as technical manpower. It formed the basis for our IT growth. But over the years, you have allowed the city to become such a high-cost area that it's not possible to even sustain that growth. Similarly, if you look at, say, sericulture, when Devraj started it, it had the vision of providing a secondary occupation for agriculturists, but it didn't have the ability or the sensitivity to take it to the next step, where it would be able to compete with, say, Chinese raw silk imports. So in some sense, you have had a seizure of thinking, the seizure of a vision, or a series of visions that seem to come so easily to the state, has stopped coming, I think, ever since about the 1990s, and we are now paying the price for that.
Okay, Prakash, what Professor Pani says is about the larger vision and things like that. One of the things about Karnataka was that Karnataka was a very progressive state. In the 70s, we saw some of the most important movement in the film industry, some of the best films coming out, the new wave films. There was enormous progressiveness which we witnessed then. Now we see, do you see that now there is more and more intolerance at the cultural level, at the social level?
I mean, without question, this state has become more intolerant socially and culturally. And there is a deeper problem. The 70s that you talk about, actually, there was some kind of a genuine renaissance,
right,
in this state, and and Bangalore was, in many ways, the center of that renaissance. But when Professor Pani says visionaries, I mean, and you take a name like Nalbadi Krishraj Vaidya,
right.
This hallowed space was actually when Jamshedji Tata asked Vivekananda, where should I go to do this great project that you're suggesting, incubate great brains, great minds. He said you should go to Mysore and talk to Nalbadi Krishraj Vaidya, and he gave 400 acres and 50 lakh of rupees those days actually.
And this is just for the sake of the audience, we are at the Indian Institute of Science
That's
campus.
Right, this hallowed ground,
Yes.
I'm saying. But the thing is, the 70s Renaissance happened, as Professor Pani said rightly, it was the fruit of a series of visions of Karnataka. Now the problem is that when you use the word visionary, somehow it's being connected to political leadership. Right. And that is a big problem, because I think the malaise is much deeper. Nobody owns this state anymore, because there is no shared vision by the state. Nobody owns it anymore. And that is a serious problem. I think the disconnect is is so bad now. I think it can only get better from here. So.
Okay, Chandan, it's very interesting what Prakash says, that nobody owns this. Is it because of the changing demography which we are witnessing that this is happening, or do you think there is a deeper malaise there?
It's not about demography, Girish. I genuinely think I don't think it's the age of where heroes cannot exist any longer. I think there is still room for a hero to emerge, but unfortunately we don't have any. In any sphere you want to look at, in literature, films, politics, but as Prakash was alluding, or insinuating rather, maybe we have just reached rock bottom and something has to change. But on a positive note, I think there's some good young writers in Kannada.
This is not just about writers. This is about the general decadence which we are witnessing. That it's not just about culture; it's about various other things that what's happening. Qureshi, talking of democratic decadence, the change in the nature of democracy which we have witnessed here in the last 10 years. Why was Karnataka dubbed as the most corrupt state? Because of the nature of politics itself. Don't you think has been responsible for it to some extent?
Undoubtedly, as Dr. Pani was saying, and I partly agree with Pani and partly I disagree with Prakash. I don't think Karnataka lacks a political leadership with a vision. For example, even as late as Mr. Devarajas, I was quite a young reporter at that time, so I asked him, I said, why do you go and sanction 28 engineering colleges in the state? In just one cabinet meeting in the evening, they decided they will have 28 engineering colleges and some 10 medical colleges. And much after he had lost power, when Gundarao was the chief minister, he told me, he said, young man, I will not be here, you will be around. You see the benefit of that. And you are seeing the benefit of it from 1984 when the IT industry started basing its activities from Bangalore. And why did it come to Bangalore? They came to Bangalore because it was a catchment area. Otherwise, you had to go to Chennai. And even the Chennai, the only Guinea Engineering College was there. So people started landing up in Bangalore, setting up shop here. And that is impacting even your state budget today. The growth factor, the fall in exports of IT exports has impacted state revenues. Bangalore has been the center of it. And unfortunately, what has happened in the last decade or so is that, or in the last almost a decade now, is that the focus of the political leadership has not been on development of the state. There was a certain planning, even in the agriculture sector or the irrigation sector, there was a certain amount of planning that was there, and there was a leadership that was committed to take the state forward. But unfortunately, in the last decade or so, what has happened is that the leadership is only interested in consolidating its own caste groups politically and making money.
Professor Pani, you have observed the politics of Karnataka for the last 3 decades. Is that responsible for the first? I want you to tell me whether there is a decline economically in Karnataka. One. Second, how is it related to the way the politics has changed in the state?
Well, the decline is more recent, but I think the problem goes back a little deeper. And that is right. I would say right until the time of Devarajas, that would probably be the turning point. Until then, economic policy and political gain were linked. Right. So if I had land reforms, I had a development strategy that came from that, and I got a political gain from that.
Right.
After that, there was a tendency, it's a national tendency, to separate the two. So you have an economic policy where you hopefully generate a lot of growth, and then with that revenue, you offer patronage to get support from the rural, from the countryside. When you keep doing that, the competition for that patronage increases.
Right.
And various groups try competing with it.
Right.
And sooner or later, you slip into a position where you have to use whatever means you can
Right.
to get your support. And that's where corruption of various forms starts taking root. And I think it's really, if one has to find a single cause, it is the point at which economic policy was separated from political success.
Right.
And whether we can return to a phase where we have, the reasons for this are numerous, but whether the issue depends, Karnataka's future depends on returning to a phase where a political leadership can emerge and say, this is my economic policy, vote for me.
Prakash, you think we are anywhere near that near that stage where you will find political visionaries emerging with economic, who makes economic sense or who tries to make economic sense to the people?
You know, not in the way it is at the moment, I think. See, you know, I'm not an economist, but you know, so I say it with some hesitation. You know, what happened to, say, Detroit, you know, where, you know, it looks like a ghost town now, will happen to Bangalore if you put all your eggs in one basket. In a sense that, I mean, 22,000 engineering seats are vacant in this state today. The problem I really believe is this, that I think Bangalore has some kind of a critical mass. It continues to be a very big center for, say, machine tooling even today, although we don't talk about it, we don't cover it like that, you know, but it has a critical mass of entrepreneurial talent, engineering skills, you know, financial skills as well. But the problem for Karnataka is that there is no city outside Bangalore which has a population in excess of 1 million. And I think the best talent in Karnataka everywhere, you know, and young people just keep leaving and they keep coming to Bangalore. And I cannot believe that's a very healthy thing to happen, because, and unless somebody thinks about, see, what do these MLAs who get elected elsewhere in Karnataka do? They come here to Bangalore and, you know, they camp here. It looks like a place where you can make a lot of money. It's like the gold rush, and, you know, they'll think they'll buy land or something, and they don't, this is not their constituency. They don't care if they get a bad name here.
So, coming back to what you said earlier, so there's no sense of ownership.
There's no ownership for his constituency as well.
Right.
And, you know, he doesn't care about this city, and that's a very crazy, you know, some 65% of the revenue of this state comes from Bangalore. I don't think that's very healthy, you know. We need at least 8-10 towns which are industrially like thriving and, you know, economically prosperous, which will create
Start with 5 at least.
strong cultural centers themselves, and, you know,
Belgaum, Hubli,
academics.
Mangalore.
There is no land area anywhere in India which has as many, say, medical professional training centers as Karnataka is, you know. You need to refocus on what you have and maybe spin it around into some kind of a positive story. But nobody talks like that. That's the problem.
No, one more, Chandan, coming to you. One more thing which people repeatedly, which I keep hearing when I come back to Bangalore or even otherwise, even when I'm in Delhi, when people talk about what's happening in Karnataka. One is the influx of outsiders, which is happening in Bangalore especially, and maybe to other smaller towns also, wherever there is this IT and, you know, the IT hubs are being created in other places. Do you think that is a healthy thing, or do you think over a period of time that itself can become a problem? The influx of outsiders from other parts of the country.
It's interesting you mentioned this. I mean, if you think about who the classic villain of Bangalore was, it used to be the Tamilian.
Right.
No longer the case.
Right.
It's this vague sense of North Indian.
Yes.
Who could mean anyone from outside South India.
Yes.
So there is some lingering resentment, but I don't think it's active hate. There are groups that are trying to cash in on this, but it's too early to say which way we will go. Yeah, the Bangalore's overwhelming, what is lazily called cosmopolitanism, could just help us, you know, manage the new settlers in a non-conflictual way.
In fact, I want all three of you also to react to this. Qureshi, what's your response to this demographic change or change in the pattern, in the kind of people who have lived in Bangalore? How will it impact? Obviously, it has had its beneficial effects. Are there going to be any ill effects which you think will have a long-term repercussions?
I seriously don't think Bangalore's cosmopolitanism is you know, I think it's a very serious thing, because when the great Kempegowda founded this city, there are more number of Telugu speaking and Tamil speaking people in Bangalore.
Right.
So there is no question of it saying that, you know, the Tamil or the Teluguites or X, Y, Z is, you know, are people who are outsiders or such thing like that. But there is, yes, there is a sense of you know, a very large number of people from outside, particularly from north, have moved down south. It's something which Bangalore, I think, has attracted a very large number of people from different parts of the country, not necessarily only North India. West Bengal is there, Orissa is there, Kashmir is there. From right across the country, we have people here in Bangalore. But there is not so much of a resentment if you get along well with them. If the people coming from outside get along well with the local people, there is, I mean, I don't think there is any issue there, because ultimately the labor that is the unskilled labor or even the skilled labor that is there in the city is completely Bangalorean. I mean, there is no doubt about that.
Anyway, we saw recently when the Assam thing happened and how there was a outgo of people, outflux, if you want to say, of people from different parts of the country. Anyway, we need to go into a short break now. Please keep watching. We'll come back very soon and continue this discussion. Welcome back. We are in Bangalore at the National Institute of Advanced Study in a special discussion. We are looking at the various problems faced by Karnataka, asking the question, what ails Karnataka? Professor Pani, taking what Qureshi said further, let us look at the larger issue in the state itself. The mismatch in development in the state is pretty obvious. Has there been any effort to balance that factor in the recent years at least?
I think what has happened in Karnataka is that we have become, as Prakash said, very dependent on just a single industry, a single.
Right.
The other states, other aspects of the state have fallen behind, partly because your success in agriculture has not been translated to industrial growth the way it's happened elsewhere, in Tamil Nadu maybe, or parts of Andhra Pradesh as well. Here, if you take a district like Mandya, which was our leading district right through the 70s, led the Green Revolution here. Today, it's among the poorer districts in Karnataka.
Okay.
And so when your capital is not moving from agriculture to industry, that's one major source of slowness in development. We have tried to make up for that by focusing entirely on Bangalore. But what happens there is that, if I may take a minute on Bangalore's cosmopolitanism, it really is a group of different areas which are fundamentally different.
Right.
So even if I get the North Indians, it's not as if you mingle with everybody in Bangalore. You have your own area and you function. It's just that the elite in each area keeps changing, and the reaction is to that elite. So when the cantonment was the elite through much of the 19th and first half of the 20th century, there was an anti-Tamil feeling.
Right.
When the IT industry came in and you had an elite coming from the north, you then found an anti-North Indian feeling. It is to the extent that the elite keeps changing. It never gets deep rooted into a point where it'll actually tear the city apart.
Right.
And I think in that sense, the somewhat slowdown of the IT industry is seeing the end of that. So,
yeah, Chandan.
I'd like to make a small note of difference with Professor Pani. I don't think it's elite-led resentment at all. In fact, in the cantonment area, you had a huge section of Muslims who lived there. But Urdu never became a problem for Kannadigas who were claiming Bangalore was being dominated by Tamilians. Similarly, the North Indian threat is not being led by North Indian elite. It's across the class strata, the carpenters, the granite. I hear conversations where people say they're here for 10 years, 15 years, and they haven't picked up a word of Kannada. And the earlier argument that if you need to secure livelihood, you pick up any local language isn't working. Now, what this might become is
something very, it's in a very fluid state. It's very, yes, Qureshi.
One, just to add to what Chandan is saying, one of the reasons why this has also, people have found Bangalore to be more attractive than compared to other cities, particularly Chennai or Hyderabad, is this classic example of a Bihari carpenter who replaced the Kannadiga carpenter, because the Kannadiga carpenter charged 150 rupees when the Bihari was ready to start work at 75 rupees. When I have known of cases like this in Bangalore. And he was asked by one of my friends as to how long have you been in Bangalore, don't you understand this much of Kannada? So he turned around and said, वो तो हमारी भाषा सीख लिया ना, हम क्यों सीखे उसकी भाषा?
Prakash,
Why should I learn his language? He understands me.
Qureshi, Prakash, this is very interesting. See, 1991 was the last major problem which Karnataka faced, when there was this anti-Tamil riots following the Kaveri tribunal being set up. Do you see that occurring? But you pointed out first in the beginning that the anti-Tamil feeling is gone.
It's a good thing that you mentioned the date, because why 1991 was the last big uprising? Because from 1991 till now, the population has grown 4 times.
Absolutely.
And so...
And it is diversified also.
See, I'll tell you, it's a highly contested idea, representation. one of the problems for Karnataka is we've always had great representation.
Right.
But now it's represented by the worst. We have the worst political representation, it seems now. The people who see when Rajkumar represented Kannada cinema, he represented a Kannada which was supposed to be refined,
Exactly.
which is to be like shishta, and it was a person who's looks softer everybody, who's a kind person. I mean, that was the representation of Kannada culturally. But the thing is, it's a very scruffy representation of Kannada that we get now.
Urban chaos, Professor Pani. There is this huge urban chaos which is happening. We're talking of, in fact, what people mentioned earlier, that there is only one big city in Karnataka. There are no smaller. What happened to those efforts to get industries out of Bangalore, shifted to other centers like Mysore, Belgaum, Bangalore? What happened to that whole plan?
See, the basic problem with that plan was it assumed that if I take capital out of Bangalore,
Right.
those other cities will develop.
Yes.
Right. Whereas now it's being seen across the world that, particularly after globalization, capital moves across the world.
Right.
Where's the question of moving to another city? You can move it back here when you want. What really determines new cities is labor movement.
Yeah.
And if you're able to generate labor movement towards other areas, you can do it. One of the things that work is when you use local capital and then local labor and function, which is why states like Tamil Nadu manage with a number of cities coming up.
Right.
We have not been able to make that link. We think that we have a kind of greenfield approach to the development. We think if I get an area and I just put in so many thousand crores, I can foster a city onto an area that's not there. We are not looking at areas which are showing urbanizing tendencies. You ask anybody there who's planning these things, they'll say, I'm putting so many crores to set up a city for something which comes out of thin air, or it happened in China, or it happened in New York, and I put it there. Fact of the matter, there's no inherent growth that you're looking at. You're not saying, all right, in Mangalore, you had this tendency, you've had a very commercial group there. Let me put a certain amount of infrastructure that will help that process. You're not looking at it like that. Whereas most other states are tending to look at it more in terms of spotting they are taking a diagnostic view that this is the tendency that's already there, let me encourage it.
Okay.
We are taking a kind of an engineering view.
We are trying to impose something.
We are trying to impose, and it doesn't
And
work.
this centralized kind of planning, sitting in Bangalore and then imposing it in Bangalore or Delhi. Okay, now let's move to the other topic. The politics of Karnataka. The entire politics of Karnataka, which we have seen, Qureshi mentioned earlier in the beginning briefly, but where is it heading? Are we seeing some kind of a coalition government getting, or do you find that the people have realized that these kind of the instability of the government in the last 7-8 years which we have seen? Do you think the people have realized that they need to change this?
My own understanding.
I want all of you to respond to this.
Covered politics more extensively than I have. But my own understanding is that Karnataka's politics, the one feature that you can see right through the last 2 decades, increasing decentralization. For the first time, what Mr. Yediyurappa proved was that you could take an MLA, switch his party, and still get him re-elected. Which means that he is a local cloud. Whatever the basis of that cloud, he has a local thing. Once that happens, the successful party is the one that attracts the most of the successful candidates, but still candidate-led. It's a strength in the sense that it's effective decentralization. But unless you can link that decentralization to an economic strategy, you'll have to keep using means that are less.
I think Professor Pani, you're being very kind, calling it, giving it some spin to economic spin to the whole thing. But
it is a bit problematic. I'll tell you why it is. The problem is that there was a dividing line between. See, you remember this headlines Ayaram, Gayaram.
Yes.
Now it does not matter,
It doesn't
because. Like the caste system is so impermeable. It seemed at one time you could not move from the ideology of one party to the ideology of another party so easily. But it seems you can actually inhabit any political space and cohabit with anybody. It's a very strange idea.
Chandan, is it complete lack of ideological
lack of representation?
Ideological grounding of political parties, that no more ideology just doesn't matter?
I think this election is crucial to see if this is indeed the case.
Yes.
I think there is genuine political confusion, and there is striving for clarity among all leading caste communities which continue to matter in how parties come into power. I think the Lingayats are confused about who their leader is and which party they should back. The Okkaligas are confused if they should go with Congress or JDS, depending on constituencies. Likewise, other groups too in the backward caste must be wondering who to back. And religious groups too.
Professor Pani, this genuine confusion?
I think we tend to underestimate the ability of the political class to actually form an intellectual leadership, which it did with, say, under Earth or somebody was able to link the various caste politics that Chandan is talking about to an actual strategy of political mobilization.
Right.
Right now, the failure of strategy has meant that everybody is just functioning on the basis that you can buy them off, which I think will not survive simply because everyone else can offer more.
Yes.
Economic developmental plan of Devaraja's is actually is now being seen by the political class as a populist program that has to be provided, and to provide that populist program they do not have the resources, and because they do not have an economic policy, they do not have a vision. They need to have a vision. I mean, what is it that North Karnataka requires in another 5 years or 10 years? Forget that. Even if you are focusing on Bangalore, what is it that Bangalore needs in 10 years time? Can Bangalore go on?
So we are coming back to what
kind of planning.
Coming back to what Professor Pani right at the beginning said, that there are no more visionaries which you find in all aspects of.
I'll tell you in a funny way. If I'm asked to write a script and say put 10 bullet points on what Karnataka means, it's very confusing now, because you no longer have this idea of what this state means. It's a very that's why the vacuum will be filled. Ananthamurthy said something he wrote once, he says, when people at the bottom of the wheel, whichever way it moves, they'll rise, he said, So he said, in some ways it's going to be positive.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end of the time. I just want all four of you to quickly, the role of the media, which has media been in any way responsible for the decline which seems to have happened in Karnataka, for some of the ailments which are there in Karnataka?
I don't think.
Qureshi first.
To some extent, I think the media is a mirror to the society, and if it has come down a little bit, yes, it has come down a little.
Chandan?
I think the media has tried its best to degenerate public discourse, but I think there's a huge disconnect between mediatized events and what is really happening on the ground, or which I think very few of us have a good grasp.
Prakash?
No, I think the media is healthy now, because earlier it was quite feudal in my opinion, because in India all revolutions are co-opted and sponsored actually. If somebody says something revolutionary, the government adopts it and puts it in its manifesto kind of thing. And you have newspaper editors who are actually pretending to be intellectual leaders also. I think that the media is so decentralized is quite a good thing.
Last words,
I would
quickly.
just take the fact that it's decentralized, yes, but it's also got very segmented. So you have it catering to the least common denominator in a very small area, and that's a problem. While the decentralization, if it retained a larger picture, would have been excellent. It's become very, very segmented.
It's poor representation at all times.
I
That's
think
the problem.
we have come to the end of the show, but the fact that everybody agrees that there are a lot of problems, there are a lot of ailments in Karnataka, and those ailments, what is the kind of solutions to those ailments? Who will come and provide those solutions? We'll still wait and watch anyway. The few months to go for the elections, we'll keep a close watch on it. Thanks for watching. Thanks to all my guests, Narendra Pani, Prakash Belwadi, Chandan Gowda and Imran Qureshi. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture.